Um, I decided to be real Russian today. I'm wearing red, and I'm going to speak about suffering. Yeah. So the first time I heard someone preach on Psalm 90, I was a very young Christian. I just graduated from university in Russia, and I was full of optimism for what life had for me. Therefore, the Psalm 90 scared me, even though I had read many books about life and death, and I had experienced loss and grief in my own life. I avoided thinking about suffering. Time passed by, and now this is one of my favorite psalms. In my own life, I have seen people die, so I can relate to what the psalmist is telling us about shortness of life. We have only one psalm written by Moses. Joshua chapter 5 tells us that the Israelites had moved about in the wilderness 40 years until all the men who were of military age when they left Egypt had died, since they had not obeyed the Lord. The whole generation that was liberated from slavery walked in the wilderness and died there. It wasn't easy for any of them, and as such, this psalm reflects the shortness and harshness of life. Most likely, Moses wrote this psalm at the end of his life. The psalm reminds us about the sober reality of time given to us on earth. Verse 5 in the psalm tells us, "Yet you sweep people away in the sleep of night, in the sleep of death. They're like the new grass of the morning. In the morning it springs up new, but by evening it's dry and withered." So I realized I have had the similar experiences with Moses. I have had death all around me. As a philology student studying languages and literature in the Siberian city of Tomsk, I had to take a Latin class for a year. And every semester I had to learn 15 new Latin proverbs. Of course, students like to choose the shortest proverbs, like in vino veritas, deus ex machina, carpe diem, per aspera ad astra, and one of them was Memento Mori. Memento Mori, meaning remember death, was chosen for its shortness, but I was afraid of the sinister meaning of this proverb, because remember death calls us to remember that we all die. Regardless of how much I tried to avoid remembering death, remember Mori was always part of my own life. As a child who grew up with a grandmother, I often heard stories of the lost loved ones in our family. Yurochka, her firstborn son, who died from diphtheria. My uncle Valera, the second son, who was killed in the mines. Grandmother's parents and siblings. My grandfathers from both sides. My other grandmother. And numerous relatives. There were pictures on the walls of the lost loved ones in our living room, and I still remember their faces clearly. Sometimes I was brought to the funerals, but as a child, I didn't realize the significance of them. I realized later that death doesn't really touch you deeply unless you lose someone you love. My first real experience with the death of a loved one was when I was at university. I was 19 when my dear cousin and friend died from leukemia. In Russia, we call our cousins brothers and sisters. Vera was her name. She was 3 years older than me. She was my cool older sister, and she was also my best friend. And we had been best friends since we were children. We grew up together, we played as children, and we hung out as teens. Vera fought the disease for 2 years. A few days after her 22nd birthday, she died. I was in Tomsk, which is like 24 hours by bus. I remember how my life was changed in a minute. When I picked up the phone, I recognized the voice of my friend Nadia, who told me, "Jenya, Vera is dead. Pack your things, and we can leave today so you can get home for the funeral." Time stopped for me at that moment. I don't remember how I fled 7 floors. I just know that I was screaming and really weeping all this time. All 24 hours that it took me to get home, I didn't sleep, I cried. In January in Russia, it's often impossible to get to my small town in the mountains. Our car got stuck in the snow several times, so we had to push it again and again. All my prayers and thoughts were about getting home. Just let me be there. Just let me get there on time. In Russia, families take the body home and sit around it, mourning and just saying goodbye and remembering the person. I missed that part. But I arrived just in time to join the procession to the cemetery. It's really hard to see the body of a loved one, but it's even harder when they take the body away and bury it. The hardest part for me was to hear the sound of a hammer nailing the top of the coffin shut. The sound meant this was the end. The sound meant that I would never see my Vera again. And another difficulty was that I had to learn to live without my Vera. I was so shocked by her death that for about 40 days I dreamed the same dream, that she was alive. I dreamed the same dream about her every night, and in each dream she would tell me that she was just pretending to be dead. It took me about 40 days, which is significant for Russian burial traditions, to accept my loss. In my last dream about Vera, she was ill and she was dying. We said goodbye. We cried. We talked about my life and what was ahead of me. I woke up gasping for air. I was drenched from my tears and weeping. After that dream, my soul and my mind finally accepted the fact that she was dead. There is no need to tell you that losing people you love, it's like losing your heart, losing your part of your soul. I don't have time to tell you about the grief and depression I went through. But ultimately, they led me to Jesus. Death is not supposed to be. It's not something that the Lord had in mind for us. We all lose loved ones when the time comes. This time will also come for every one of us, no matter where we live, what diet we follow, or how much we exercise. After Wheaton College admitted me, I received an email saying that I had received the Billy Graham scholarship. It was one of the happiest days in my life. In my apartment in Novosibirsk, I cried, laughed, and danced at the same time. But I faced the dilemma of whether or not I should go. While I felt a clear call from the Lord and a long-standing dream to study psychology from a Christian perspective, my mother was an invalid. She suffered from epilepsy and required much assistance. Moreover, she suffered an unknown, undiagnosed illness. She started to lose weight very quickly and complained of having swollen limbs. I was torn apart. I had never gone far away because I had always wanted to be close to her if something happened. I was always afraid to be too far from her for too long. When I received the scholarship, I knew it was from the Lord, but I didn't know how I could leave my mama when she was getting worse. I prayed, but all I could hear from the Lord was, "Let the dead bury their own dead." I avoided listening to that voice because I knew what it meant. When I revealed my dilemma to my mama, she told me to go and not to wait for her to die. She was my anchor. I know it was a sacrifice for her because she wanted me to live closer to the family. I accepted the scholarship and came to Wheaton. 3 weeks later, my mama died. The world stopped spinning for me. There is no loss like when you lose your mother. I felt I had lost my anchor, my protection, my absolute love and her acceptance. Her absolute love and acceptance. Love has its print. My mama's love, care, sacrifice, and protection left its print on me. I know what it's like to be loved greatly by someone. 3 months ago, in November 2018, I lost another loved one. My dear babushka, Everywhere in the world, people know the Russian word babushka. It's a very affectionate, tender way of word saying grandmother in Russian. My babushka was my second mother to me. In some ways, my primary caregiver, because my mother was often ill and affected by epileptic seizures. I am who I am because of my grandmother. It is still hard for me to talk about her because the pain of her loss is still too fresh. She was the most resilient person in my life. I saw her lose four of her 6 children, 1 granddaughter, 2 husbands, and numerous friends. She wept at every loss. We were often afraid for her because she would grieve so deeply with everyone. Despite her grief, she still found joy. I never was afraid at God when I lost my sister, uncle, aunt, or my mama, but I felt betrayed by Jesus when my grandma died. She was the one person I loved the most in this world. I was fully loved and accepted by her, and I had so much fun with her. She was so playful, so much funny and witty. Losing her was just brutal and cruel. Her death was the last straw for me. It broke me. It broke me into 1,000 pieces. I know that anger at God is not a popular idea among Christians, but those who judge me may not ever have read the book of Psalms. It took me 2 months to forgive God, but for some people it takes years. Why do I tell you about all these losses in my life? Not to cause pity, and certainly not to depress you with my Russian story. I am telling you this because in the United States I have not yet heard a good sermon on loss, pain, and suffering. Some people may believe that Americans never suffer, but I am in the mental health field. I see people suffer all the time. So why does nobody speak about the pain of grief and loss? Why are churches silent about such a significant part of our life? Everyone you know will die one day, and you will also die. I am such a bright ray of sunshine, right? Sometimes death can come. Sometimes death can be welcomed. My auntie Tanya, Vera's mother, was diagnosed with the same type of cancer as her daughter 10 years later. She also died in January on Russian Orthodox Christmas Day. She was the only one whom I was able to say goodbye to. I came a few days before her death. She asked my grandma and me to bathe her because she wasn't able to do it herself anymore. When my grandma and I finished washing her, she looked at my grandma and said, "Mama, let me go. I can't die because you won't let me." My grandma cried when she asked, "How can I let you go? You're my dоченька." It's a very affectionate way of saying daughter in Russian. My auntie gave my mother an Orthodox prayer of the blessing for death to pray over her. And my grandma prayed over her with tears. It was one of the saddest moments of my life, to watch how mother had to bless her daughter so that her daughter could die. I laid down next to my aunt Tanya after that prayer and asked her if she was afraid. She said, "No, Zhenichka, I'm not afraid of anything anymore." That night she fell asleep and never woke up. Her loss was painful for me, but I always had peace with her death. Sometimes physical and emotional pain is excruciating to endure, and death comes as a welcome friend. Life is hard, but we can find joyful moments in it. I'm not going to finish with a happy ending. It's not a Russian way. I still experience grief, sadness, and emptiness on significant dates. People may say, time heals. It does not. But it makes the pain not as acute. There were so many deaths in the beginning of this semester at Wheaton and at my practicum site, and also among my friends and family in Russia. 15 deaths in total. So it feels like if evil has had its victory, but it's important to remember that evil is not victorious. Paul tells us in 1 Corinthians 15:26 that the last enemy to be destroyed is death. I love this cartoon picture. I saw it a long time ago, but this image got stuck in my head. Life is worth living. Life is worth fighting for, even when it's hard. The acceptance of our finality helps us to live life more fully. And this is the paradox of suffering and loss in life, isn't it? My babushka was 87 when she died last November. For the past 10, 15 years, she would tell me goodbye like it was the last time we saw each other. She prepared everything for her funeral long before she died. She was ready to go. But every time we talked, she would tell me, "My time is close, but I don't want to go. I love my life. I want to continue living." Alexander Solzhenitsyn, who suffered greatly in this life, said, "It's, however, not suffering that sets us free from ourselves and our comfortable numbness, but the acceptance of suffering. This is the beginning of wisdom." My grandma accepted suffering and was ready for her death long before her time came. And she had still found hope and joy in life. Her example showed me that even though we may suffer, life is worth living when we are still able to believe, to hope, to rejoice, to love, and to grow. Psalm 90:12 expresses the same idea. Teach us to number our days, that we may gain a heart of wisdom. The hardest part of life is facing the adversities courageously and openly, instead of running away from them, accepting instead of avoiding, fighting back instead of giving up. What helped me to survive these losses and keep going? Faith. My faith in God and that He is with me in the hardest moments of my life. Psalm 23:4 says, "Even though I walk through the darkest valley, I will fear no evil, for you are with me." The Isaiah 41:10, "So do not fear, for I am with you. Do not be dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you and help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand." The journey through the grief is a lonely journey through the desert. So to have a companion like Jesus is uplifting and comforting. Hope also helps me going. There is a Russian saying, "Hope dies last," and a song that says, "Hope is my compass in life." My hope is in heaven, and that one day I will see my loved ones again. Every time when my grandma said goodbye to me like it was our last time, I would always tell her, "Wait for me, and I will come back to you. Just wait for me." I know she's still waiting for me to come, but in another place. I have hope for what Revelation 21:4 tells us. He will wipe every tear from their eyes. There will be no more death, or mourning, or crying, or pain, for the old order of things has passed away. But I also hope for a better life for me here. David in Psalm 27:13-14 tells us, "I remain confident of this. I will see the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living." Wait for the Lord. Be strong and take heart and wait for the Lord. Love is another thing that helps me to keep going. My lost loved ones are not pictures on the wall. They are part of me. They live through me. Their lives and deaths have made me who I am. I want to live because of them, because they showed me that this life is precious, even when it's hard. Vera, Mama, and Babushka with the closest people in my life, the ones I love the most. I want to live because I have love, because I have a life that my Vera never had. I want to live because of my mother's sacrifice. I want to live because my grandma was so proud of me. Henry Nouwen writes, the more you have loved and have allowed yourself to suffer because of your love, the more you will be able to let your heart grow wider and deeper. When your love is truly giving and receiving, those whom you love will not leave your heart, even when they depart from you. And now these three remain: faith, hope, and love. But the greatest of these is love. Faith, hope, and love can help you to go through and overcome suffering. I want to finish by sharing this benediction taken from the Psalm 90 of Moses. Satisfy us in the morning with your unfailing love, that we may sing for joy and be glad all our days. Make us glad for as many days as you have afflicted us, for as many years as we have seen trouble. May your deeds be shown to your servants, your splendor to their children. May the favor of the Lord our God rest on us. Amen. Go in peace.